Thank you very much. So actually, I would like to invite Kenny, Hangin, and Yuvia to the stage. There you go. Welcome. Sup. Hello. Please. All right. So we've heard a lot today from Sean, from Ben. We had a panel. And today, at least at this panel, we're going to talk, like Dan mentioned, a little bit about privacy and cloud computation. We've got Astar, we've got Crust, we've got Kenny from Manta. But I think the underlying principle, what we're actually going to be discussing is interoperability. And we've touched upon this with some of the dApp talk that we've heard, right? How folks are achieving interoperability within dApps and what the kind of outlook is there. But to kick it off, why don't we start with a round of introductions? So like Dan mentioned, I'm Urban. I work at the DevRel team at Parity. Why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, but also talk a little bit about the project, what Crust does, what you guys actually do.
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Yuvia. I'm the US marketing lead at Crust. And basically, Crust Network is a decentralized cloud storage protocol which incentivizes the use of IPFS. So you can kind of think of us like Filecoin, but pretty fast and based on Substrate.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Han from Phala Network. So maybe we're not like any traditional blockchain. We're actually an off-chain computation network. So what is off-chain? Like we have Ink smart contract running on the blockchain. We pull it off, port it to the off-chain world. So like on-chain, you cannot access the internet. You cannot send the transaction directly to the other blockchains. But our off-chain worker can do that. So this is what we're doing, and we want to make the off-chain computation complementary, interoperable to the on-chain smart contract.
And hey everyone, my name is Kenny. I'm one of the co-founders of Manta Network, and we are building layer 1 on-chain privacy using zero-knowledge proofs, using Substrate and plugging into the Polkadot ecosystem. We actually just announced that we secured a parachain very recently, and we're starting to launch on mainnet. We've got a lot of developer tools, so if anyone's interested in plugging in on-chain privacy to their applications as a feature, definitely would love to talk to you guys afterwards. At the core of Manta Network, right, like we're cryptographers. I'm not a cryptographer, so I guess I can't say we. They're cryptographers. But I think like that's really what we specialize in, and we currently have the fastest prover speed of any layer 1 network in the Web3 space. And so I think that is a very notable achievement for anyone working in the zero-knowledge proof space, because computation is extremely heavy, it's extremely expensive, but yeah, happy to be here, happy to be building in the Polkadot ecosystem, and let's try to take ZK far.
Awesome, thank you. And congrats on the slot, by the way. Yeah. So thank you for the introductions. Before we dive deeper into the interoperability aspect and so on, I'd really like for you all to share a little bit with the audience. Why did you initially decide to become a Polkadot parachain, right? What was the added value of becoming a parachain within the Polkadot ecosystem? Or just even taking out Polkadot, why did you even consider building a blockchain for your purpose, right? And when talking about Polkadot, did interoperability play a deciding factor when it came to that? So maybe Kenny, let's kick it off with you, since you've kind of secured your slot. So you have.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, when we started building Manta, I think the core of our philosophy was essentially, how do you make on-chain privacy a utility? Because matter of fact, privacy is extremely important, and I think it's fundamental for scaling out Web3 to anything that's usable beyond like where we are today. And so, like one of the problems here is that privacy currently in Web3 is not a utility. What I mean by that is, when you turn on your water, right, or when you turn on your faucet, water comes out. But you don't really care where the water comes from. You don't care who supplies the water. The fact of the matter is you want to wash your face, right? And you can wash your face when you turn on the faucet. I think that should be the exact same concept around privacy in Web3. Right now, we have a lot of tools and applications out there that say, hey, you want privacy, come to my network, use my use case, et cetera, but we don't really say, hey, do you want to plug privacy into your existing applications and have privacy by default for your users rather than having them jump through hoops in order to access that on-chain privacy. And so when we started building, we were thinking, okay, we want to build the fastest zero-knowledge proof system that allows for people to plug Manta Network in as a utility. Instead of turning on the faucet and water comes out, turn on the faucet, privacy's out, right? And so how do you do that? You can't really build that on Ethereum. Ethereum isn't really structured that way. You can't really build that as a smart contract. We have to build as a layer 1 network. And if we wanted to build as a layer 1 network, the next question is, okay, how do we build an ecosystem around us, right? And so naturally gravitating towards Polkadot, especially with the parachains and XCM, made a lot of sense for us because that meant that we were able to bring our privacy utility to a lot of other ecosystems in a very seamless manner. And so to date, right, like, we've been working with Moonbeam very closely on doing remote transactions. And actually for one of the recent hackathons, one of our Rust engineers actually built a functional proof of concept that allows you to mint private NFTs through Moonbeam. And so what people are able to do is they go on Moonbeam, they open up MetaMask, that MetaMask creates a ZK address on Manta Network automatically, and that person can then say, okay, I'm gonna mint an NFT, which then gets privatized on Manta Network, and you can transfer that NFT through Manta Network's infrastructure, all seamlessly without leaving Moonbeam. And so I think that's the power of like exactly where we're here for when building on Polkadot, right? Being able to build that interoperability, being able to build into that seamlessness, and really plug in privacy as a utility.
Yeah, Hangin, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good example how to use the interoperability offered by the Polkadot network. So yeah, first question, so why we're building on Substrate? And I think the immediate answer is the flexibility. You know, it's really hard to do some heavily computation job in the smart contract, like building on Solidity. But on Substrate, like we can compile very, very complex thing into the WebAssembly and run it on the blockchain. We even built like a X509 certification verification on the blockchain, and I think that will be insane on Ethereum. So yeah, this is why we build on Substrate. And on Polkadot, I think things are different, right? Because everyone are building their own parachain. So why people building parachain? I think one of the reasons is still the scalability. There could be just one blockchain. People don't need to use the XCM or cross-chain messaging to interact with each other. But the case is that it cannot scale, right? We need maybe hundreds of application blockchain to make the best use of the sharding system in Polkadot. Then interoperability is a must. And I would say XCM works pretty well on our side. One of the projects we're building is called Sub-Bridge. It enables like any bridge between the parachains and also the other bridges. Now we are connected to Ethereum. It only has one Phala token connected, but we are also connected with all the other parachains. So we build a router, the router of the bridges. So as long as XCM and some other bridges are connected together, they can just work out of the box without the need to integrate the bridge to every parachain. Spend a lot of time for the integration. Yeah, I think that's the best part we're using XCM.
Yeah, I think they both really hit two main important points, which is the interoperability, and then also XCM is really important for us to maintain, to be fully decentralized. And then another thing I think they didn't mention was the shared security. It's really important for us because you don't want people to be able to hack into your files, right? So I think those are all three main important things. And the other thing is also the Polkadot community is really great. We all really help each other a lot. So that's another additional aspect outside of the technical aspect.
Thank you. And we're going to come back to that in a bit. But So I don't know if you guys remember, specifically when it comes to like privacy stuff and so on, back in 2018, 2019, I think Ernst & Young was building on Ethereum, I think it was called Nightshade or something like that, to mint basically private NFTs for supply chain reasons, right? And when they launched this, it was extremely computationally heavy, extremely, like gas fees were insane. Like nobody would be using this. So I do see why, like Kenny and you all mentioned, there's a distinct advantage to kind of owning that on a blockchain layer. And this also enables many new use cases for it, right? Obviously, even outside of interoperability, this is a big deal because you unlock stuff that essentially becomes a commodity almost, right? So let's talk a little bit about these use cases. What you all see first within your own blockchain ecosystem, but also what is enabled via XCM and the whole interoperability narrative within Polkadot. This would not be enabled. And I think, Kenny, you mentioned a really cool one, the privacy NFTs being minted from Moonbeam. Yeah, I'd really like to hear and dig into some of these use cases that you see, not as only on your chains, but beyond what is enabled via XCM. Who wants to start?
Okay, I can go first. So for us, XCM is pretty important because when we're storing some data, we're storing it in off-chain storage nodes. So, and we also have our own custom blockchain. So to connect to some other projects, we have to use cross-chain bridges. So for XCM, it allows us to connect to any parachain in the Polkadot ecosystem in a fully decentralized way because everything is on-chain. And that's kind of like one of our main tenets that we believe in is full decentralization. So I think that's the important part for us.
Cool. So yeah, I mentioned a little bit about one project we're building, the sub-bridge, basically the router of bridges. XCM is one, we just conceptually say XCM is one of the bridge because it's building on Polkadot. And we also can have bridge like Sigma, which is we're currently collaborating with, connect to maybe some Ethereum blockchain or layer 2s. I think the elegant part is that as long as we are connected with one bridge, we make it immediately available to all the parachains. And XCM is the standard, and all the parachains follow the standard. So there's even no cost for any integration because all the transactions are just the very standard XCM transactions. So this really saves a lot of time and save the cost for the entire ecosystem to build an interoperable system. But we also want to put this effort one step further. So if we can connect some bridges together, why cannot we just extend it to swaps? So I think so far there's no any running protocol supports the aggregator of cross-chain swap, right? We have 1 inch on Ethereum, but it can also aggregate the swap on Ethereum, and there's no cross-chain swap. So one of the project we're working on is that we have the bridge to connect the token between the parachains and the other blockchains. Then we can even enable the swap on those blockchains. We have a router, we can calculate the best route from this chain to that chain, from this assets to that assets. Yeah, I think like without XCM, this is something we have never think about that can be realized before. So yeah, really a lot of things to be explored.
Yeah, and also, talking about these sort of use cases that are enabled, I think for people that are starting off building projects, right, there's sort of some sort of workflow, this mental model that you kind of have to go through to figure out exactly what type of project you want to build. And what I mean by that is like, some projects it makes sense to be a smart contract. Some projects it makes sense to be more of a parachain. And so Urban, I think the example you gave with like Ernst & Young and the minting of like private NFTs, it's not that's not a problem of necessarily ZK optimization more than it is the problem on the infrastructure level. And so, you see this same issue with Tornado Cash when it was around, right? Like when people, actually Tornado Cash is still around. The front end isn't really around right now, but the smart contract still exists. But the point is that when you were creating stuff on, or not creating, privatizing things on Tornado Cash, privatizing assets, the gas fee it cost to privatize those assets were a major financial barrier for a majority of users, right? I mean, it would be like $100, $200 in terms of gas fees. And so when you think about it, right, like the financial barrier turns, or is very against the notion of using privacy as a utility. And it becomes a self-selection process whereby only people who are willing to spend that $100, $200 in value to do what they need to do, right, end up using these types of tools. Whereby if you're able to remove that financial barrier, that becomes more accessible privacy to a lot of different use cases, a lot of different users, a much larger market share. And I think like that's definitely the path to kind of pushing privacy to become more ubiquitous and more understandable and more usable in the Web3 ecosystem. And so, by comparison, us minting ZK NFTs through Moonbeam cost pennies, right? I mean, like just doing a crypto asset transaction privately through Tornado Cash costs hundreds of dollars. And so I think like, from that perspective, it really highlights that in our case, it was definitely the right move to go the infrastructure route and build as this type of layer one. But it may not necessarily always be the case, right? If you are trying to build a DeFi application, for example, maybe like a swap, right? Maybe a lending protocol, you're not necessarily having to optimize as much on the infrastructure layer. And so in those cases, right, smart contracts could very well make sense. And so, that's all just to say, like, from my perspective, right, building a parachain, maintaining a parachain is an extremely heavy lift, and it may or may not make sense for all the use cases out there.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think we've heard from Ben exactly that, right? It might not make sense at all the points in your lifetime. So, Yuvia, you mentioned before the community and so on. So I'd like to steer the conversation a little bit towards that. Aside from specifically talking about interoperability and working with one another, aside from technical integrations that need to happen, how does working together, quote unquote, look like within the Polkadot ecosystem?
Yeah, I think we work together so much. Obviously, on events like this, we all come together all the time. And I know all of us, which are based in different areas, we have like group chats together and we host events together in our like hometowns. And like for us, we are planning with Moonbeam and Robonomics and a few others to host an event series in San Francisco in a few months. But yeah, aside from like the events, we also host online events together, and we attend conferences together. And I think another good thing I would say is like, if there's something that's gonna benefit the entire community, we can create a grant for that, and then everyone reaps the benefits, not just one person. So it's pretty great to work with like all the parachains because, when one is doing well, we're all doing well.
Yeah, I just want to add one point to your sharing. I think the cross-team grant program is really interesting, and I see it's evolving in the ecosystem. Like now, most of the new projects or new teams joining the Polkadot ecosystem are not likely just use the like one parachain or the service from one team. Then every parachain almost has the grant program, and combine them together, it will be a really benefit for the new developers. So I would, I think this is really amazing. I have never seen that in the other ecosystems so far.
Yeah, and then one other thing I think from like an ecosystem growth perspective is this concept of as a service, right? We see this in Web 2 with like cloud computing. infrastructure as a service, platforms as a service, software as a service, right? And then when we get into the Polkadot ecosystem, I think we see a lot of different utilities as a service, right? Privacy as a service that you can then plug into Moonbeam, EVM as a service, WASM smart contracts as a service, right? Like these are all, like essentially all these different parachains on the infrastructure level are building these tools for specific use cases that then we can plug into one another to enhance those use cases that you can't really find in other ecosystems, right? I mean, where else are you finding private or privacy enhancing features directly plugged into EVM smart contracts, right? Like that's not existing on Ethereum, right? If you want to use Aztec, you have to use a programming, their own custom language called Noir, right? It's not Solidity based. And so, you know, there's workarounds and hacks to go through that, but like, you know, purely or bringing privacy directly to EVM, right? I don't think that really exists anywhere. And I think it's really cool that we're already creating that within the Polkadot ecosystem.
So to play the devil's advocate a little bit, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, though. Right? There's challenges with building an ecosystem that is interoperable. Not like you mentioned, it's a technical lift to build a parachain. It's a technical lift to maintain it. What are some of the challenges that you see coming something like this to life? Aside, it can be technical, community, marketing, BD, I don't know. Whatever you think is important. Maybe Kenny, let's kick it off with you then.
Yeah, sure. So apart from, you know, all the rainbows and ponies, we do have, I think, and this is more of like an ecosystem, a Web3 ecosystem issue in general, right? Like especially in these types of build markets that aren't really focused or aren't really attracting as many users, right? Web3 in general, I believe, I think everyone understands, right, has a huge issue with attracting actual users, right? This isn't just like a Polkadot specific problem, but like when you look at everything else right now in terms of daily active users, monthly active users outside of Ethereum, and even Ethereum, right? Like if you really, you know, zoom out a little bit and look at Web2 projects, right? It's peanuts. Right? And so the question is like, how do you actually start attracting users to Web3? And I think like that sort of mentality requires a fundamental shift in how we develop applications. Because right now, right, like, you know, if we jump outside of Polkadot, right, using Polkadot.js and, you know, these tools in the Polkadot ecosystem versus like if you use MetaMask and then you go into a layer 2 solution and then you have to migrate your assets from, you know, Ethereum to a layer 2 solution and all this other stuff, it's extremely intimidating even for those of us in the room that have been in Web3 for so long and we're building the applications, and at the same time, like I'm triple checking my, you know, wallet address because now there's another hack where they generate wallet addresses that look kind of like your wallet address, right? And so I have to like double check random numbers. And so it's extremely intimidating, and the user experience honestly is very broken, right? And so like in general, I think, you know, looking at this and you know, I maybe I'm a little too challenging here, but I do think that we should take more of like a Web 2 approach in building these types of applications to start attracting users and onboarding them into Web 3, right? Then when you build these applications, the question is, do you need everyone to have a wallet address and maintain their own secret seed phrase from day one, right? Some applications, especially on the infrastructure level, probably. But when you start layering on top of that, right? When you start building out the application layers, maybe they may not necessarily all need that. And that can be a transition that a user can move into rather than, you know, just throwing them a wallet address, a random alphanumeric string, and saying good luck on day one, right? Because like we're all kind of scared of that. I'm kind of scared of that, right? Every new wallet address I create is like super intimidating. I was trying to get my ticket to ETHDenver, which like in the application process, they're like, hey, give us your wallet address, and if you get selected, we'll like let you mint your NFT ticket. And I got selected, and I'm like, yay! I mean, everyone got selected, I guess. Yeah, we all got these, right? But my problem was like, when I got the email, I was like, okay, let's mint my NFT. Oh, this wallet address is not associated with any registration. Okay, let me try this one. Okay, this one's not associated with any registration. I had to try like 50 addresses, right? And so like the user experience is broken, and the reason we shouldn't even have to create 50 addresses, but why are we creating 50 addresses? Because we care about privacy. Okay, like so there's a lot of sort of user experience issues that are really broken that I think we definitely need to fix. Yeah.
Yeah. Hang in, you want to go?
Yeah, I just follow on the problem of user experience. So not sure if you guys have have tried to maybe transfer some token from the one power chain to another power chain. Especially, yeah, give an example. Like we have two power chains. One is Phala, another is Phala. And we share the same token, right? We are connected to the Ethereum, so we can use the two-side bridges to bring the Phala token from Phala to Ethereum and to Phala. And then usually, like people want to cash out some Phala token, so we're going to move it to some swap, maybe on A star. Then things become even more interesting. We have a bridge called sub-bridge. It can bridge Phala token to A star. And on A star, there's another. There are actually three different execution environments: the palette, the EVM, and also the ink environment. So it arrives on the palette side, and another action is needed to move it to the EVM side, and another action is needed to swap it to maybe USDT. So this is a lot of steps. Part of the reason is so far Kusama and Polkadot are not connected yet, but I think this can be solved pretty fast because I hear maybe later this year there will be a bridge between Kusama and Polkadot. But why can't we make it even easier? So one thing we're working on is we have the cross-chain DEX aggregator. And it can be used to swap the token. It can also be used to connect different steps together. So you don't need to pay the fee at each blockchain, on Ethereum, on Phala, on A star, or a different environment. It just done it automatically. So yeah, I just take this example to show that interoperability is not like a free lunch. It has some cost, but the good thing is we're seeing the improvements and the solution popping up every day. So yeah, I believe this will become a solved problem very soon.
Yeah, I think they both mentioned most of it, but I guess I would say another thing, just because Polkadot is pretty much infrastructure focused and targeting mostly devs or infrastructure devs, a lot of really even baby devs, sometimes they come to our events, they don't know what we're talking about because there's a big learning curve. Like if you've just been coding on Ethereum and then you come over to Polkadot, there's a big learning curve, right? So even just with the Polkadot JS, it's pretty difficult to use. A lot of people are confused. Oh, you have to switch parachains, and for us to Crust, we have 3 different portals that you can use because we have a Kusama parachain, we have a normal parachain, and then before we had a parachain, we just had a little Crust portal. So it gets confusing, where did your tokens go, which one? And yeah, I think even we've been having some problems with people just trying to send all their tokens out because there's this safety feature where it won't let you send all your tokens at once. And then people are just DMing us in the group chat I can't move my tokens. Oh my God, you're scamming me. And it's just they just needed to click a little switch. So I think, yeah, it's just because, it's good that we focus specifically on devs, right? Because Polkadot is infrastructure, but for newcomers, they might just not understand why Polkadot really is needed.
So nice range of things to work on. Cool, but shifting gears, right? We've spoken a little bit about what you guys do, the use cases, we've addressed some challenges, but looking into the future right now, 2, 3, maybe 5+ years, which is, a lot of years in Web3, if we put it like that. How do you see this whole Web3 Polkadot interoperability thing play out, and how is it going to contribute to, we tend to think about Polkadot and Web3, I think in general, as going multi-chain, right? We've moved away from that paradigm of, oh, this is Bitcoin, that's it. And then Ethereum came, and that's not it, obviously. But there's much more to come even within the Polkadot ecosystem. So how do you guys see the future of interoperability, and how does it contribute to the multi-chain era? So maybe Hangin, let's kick it off with you.
Yeah, I think I can start with something different. We're pretty familiar with the interoperability, like sending the token or cross-chain swap. But actually, I think another kind of interoperability is the interoperability between the on-chain part and off-chain part. Yeah, and probably we're one of the project working on that, and Crust is another. Different kind of off-chain computation or off-chain storage. But then if we combine them together, let's see what we can get, right? We have computation, we have storage, we have privacy. Then that's a full functional cloud, probably. It could be maybe at some point we can even replace the centralized cloud like Amazon or Google Cloud. But yeah, let's see. Yeah. One day in the crypto is like 1 year in the, it's maybe too, maybe it's too much, but crypto space is really evolving very fast. So really hard to tell how it will look like 5 years later. But I think even 1 year later, things will change completely. And I think Polkadot can play a really important role in the future.
Cool. Yuvia?
Yeah, I think in the multi-chain future, if everything is connected, we can see some like really interesting use cases. Right now, we've been like looking into decentralized social. So like I can give an example where maybe you've connected your decentralized social and your decentralized storage with Crust, right? And you have, I don't know, a account on some like decentralized social platform on Ethereum. And you can connect your social graph, your social content, basically anything you posted and your followers and all that, you can connect it to an IPFS CID. And then now let's say there's a new platform that gets released on Solana or wherever, somewhere else, some completely different chain. And you can just move your CID from one chain to the next, and you can keep all of your followers, keep all of your posts. So you never have to worry about like restarting from scratch wherever you go, which this is like a problem both in Web 2 and Web 3 right now, right? Because a lot of people, they get banned from their accounts and then they just lose everything that they've been working on for years, right? So I think that's one really cool thing that could happen in the future where we all have ownership over all of our data.
So as Hong mentioned, time is relative. 1 year in the real world is like 5 years in the crypto space. And so we're really talking about 15 years from now, right? And so even 5 years from now, right? Like, honestly, I hope that Polkadot doesn't matter. I hope that Manta doesn't matter. I hope that we're not still in the same room telling people to build on an infrastructure level, because we really need to abstract away all this infrastructure stuff and start building applications on top of it all, right? Usable applications for 1 billion users, for 3 billion users. My God, if 3 billion users are using Uniswap, like, dude, people think they're being scammed now. Like, they can't use Uniswap. They're going to be complaining to Uniswap customer service, whatever the heck that is, right? Like, imagine 100, 1,000 times the amount of complaints every single day because now you've scaled it out to 3 billion users, right? That's not usable. We can't expect users to be like, oh, yeah, no problem. Let me just save my secret key very securely, right? I mean, like, most of the secret keys are going to end up on like some sort of TXT file on your desktop, right? And that's going to end up becoming another vulnerability by hackers because they no longer need to hack your actual application. They just have to install a little Trojan on your computer or something, right? And so like I think like when we're building for the future, right? Like we have to recognize where our place is, right? And like when I'm saying like Polkadot doesn't matter and Manta doesn't matter, I'm not saying that we're irrelevant. We're definitely giants, but we have to recognize that we are like, the very foundational base layers of this gigantic tower, right? And at the base layer in the Web 2 space, we have, Ericsson supplying telecom devices. We have the telecom hardware vendors supplying wires. I don't even know their names, right? But it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't need to know their names, but they're also billion-dollar companies that none of us really care about, right? And I think like that's exactly what we should be building for. And the user experience 5 years from now, 10 years from now, needs to be one where maybe a lot of components on top of the decentralized infrastructure that we're already building is centralized. I would hope so, because that allows people to have a much more seamless user experience. And I don't think pure centralization is necessarily a bad thing, especially because it promotes much more competition, which promotes much more innovation. And yeah, you know, like if governments are still around 5 or 10 years from now, like they're probably going to want their own version of whatever application we're building, right? So, you know, from a practical standpoint, I think like we want to be the foundations of these types of future things.
So on that aspirational note, we're gonna wrap it up. So Kenny, Hangin, Yuvia, thank you very much for joining us for this panel. Yeah, thank you very much.